My name is Dr. Andria Jones-Bitton. I am an epidemiologist and an associate professor in the Department of Population Medicine at the University of Guelph, although I am not representing the University of Guelph tonight. I am the parent of two children who are in grades 3 and 5 at a school in the Upper Grand District School Board. I'm a member of the grassroots advocacy group Ontario Safe. This group is made up of concerned parents, education workers, and community members. Ontario Safe has been calling on the provincial government to reduce class sizes. My intention in delegating today is twofold. One, I would like to request that the Upper Grand District School Board take every possible action to achieve optimal physical distancing on school buses and in classrooms. Two, I would like to request that the board ensure that clear and accessible information about bus, classroom, and recess conditions is disseminated to all guardians of children attending Upper Grand District schools. Regarding class sizes, the safest, most enduring pandemic school reopening and operation requires implementation of a comprehensive bundle of COVID-19 mitigation measures on school buses and in classrooms. Experts have repeatedly stressed that we should borrow from the practices used in healthcare to plan the safest operation of schools. In hospitals, a layered infection prevention and control strategy is used. The first level of protection and control is elimination. Robust public health measures are taken to contain the spread of infection in communities. In the case of COVID-19, we have been encouraged to follow physical distancing, masking, and hand washing guidelines to limit interactions with others, and testing and contact tracing provide further contribution to protection and control. These elimination strategies can reduce the overall spread of COVID-19 and, by extension, keep COVID-19 out of schools. While difficult and imperfect, keeping COVID-19 out of schools is our most effective line of defense. However, as a result of the loosening of restrictions on gatherings over the summer months, school reopening has coincided with increasing community transmission of COVID-19. As elimination becomes more elusive, additional layered measures will be critical to reducing the spread of COVID-19 in schools. These additional measures include environmental cleaning, frequent hand washing, optimizing ventilation, expanding outdoor learning, use of non-medical masks, reducing class sizes and bus occupancy, and ensuring physical distancing of 2 meters between people in indoor settings. These measures work synergistically to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission. We commend local public health leadership and the Upper Grand District School Board for taking a strong position on non-medical masks by mandating masking for all students from kindergarten through grade 12. It is important to be aware that masks alone do not provide sufficient protection to people on buses and in schools. Masks must be combined with other strategies, including physical distancing, to achieve the safest possible bus and school environments. Physical distancing has been one of the fundamental measures implemented to control the spread of COVID-19. The broad goal of physical distancing is to reduce direct contact between individuals in order to limit the risk of COVID-19 transmission. While data suggests that physical distancing of at least 1 meter offers some benefit, larger distances of at least 2 meters offer greater protection. 2 meters of physical distancing, of course, is recommended by most public health officials. Physical distancing is especially critical across the entire school environment, both on buses and in schools. The mixing of people between these two crowded settings creates additive risks that must be meaningfully addressed. On school buses and in standard Ontario classrooms, it is not possible to achieve optimal physical distancing without dramatically reducing the number of occupants. These reductions are required in order to implement public health best practices and to minimize the risk of COVID-19 transmission to students and workers, and to the families and communities in which those students and workers are embedded. The myriad developmental, social, and health benefits of an in-person education for children and youth cannot be overstated. And I believe that all of us present here are well aware of and are committed to a robust, universal public education system. To protect and sustain in-person schooling, we must invest in school reopening and operating plans that incorporate all COVID-19 mitigation measures. We are asking the board to petition the province for the funds necessary to reduce bus occupancy and class sizes so that optimal 2-meter physical distancing can be achieved on buses and in classrooms. We are asking the board to undertake any actions within its purview to reduce bus occupancy and class sizes while awaiting further leadership from the province. We are pleading with the board to act with haste to protect students, transportation and education workers, families and communities, and to stave off school closures. Our second request to the board relates to transparency. In addition to sharing our concerns about class and bus occupancy, I would like to request that the board streamline and standardize communication with parents and guardians about bus and classroom conditions. Messaging to guardians must be accessible. Guardians have not been meaningfully engaged in the Ministry of Education's back-to-school planning or in the board-level implementation. The Ministry of Education's return-to-school templates have created equity and ethical issues. The risks inherent in such an incomplete plan will not be borne equally by all groups. Decision-making has not been informed for any guardian, and the quality of information that has been shared with guardians varies by school and within classes. I've learned about a grade 5-6 split class containing 26 students where the desks were originally 50 centimeters apart. Only some guardians were provided with information about desk spacing in their individual conversations with the classroom teacher. The spacing was improved to 1 meter when one guardian called public health to make an official complaint. I am concerned that there are other classrooms that are very crowded like this one, which have not received such individual attention in order to optimize the spacing of students. I have learned that the average number of students on Upper Grand District School Board buses is 34, and I have heard that children from multiple schools are on the same buses, minimizing the benefits of so-called cohorts. An average occupancy of 34 does not allow for any meaningful distancing. Bus occupancy would need to be reduced to 8 in order to achieve 2 meters of physical distancing. If a bus carried 23 people, all of them staggered in their seats, each student would be 84 centimeters from at least one of their neighbors. Guardians who have enrolled children in in-person learning have a clear vested interest in transportation and classroom conditions. The current exclusion of parents and guardians from schools makes clear communication more important than ever. All guardians should be aware of the number of people on buses and in classrooms and of the distance between individuals. Classroom configurations, snack and meal plans, recess and outdoor curriculum plans should be universally provided. Hence, we are calling on the board to support school administration and staff to expediently distribute information to guardians. This information should be distributed and promoted widely across multiple platforms and made available in various languages to accommodate guardians whose first language may not be English. In closing, the immediate and long-term health and well-being of children, families, and communities relies on a comprehensive bundle of COVID-19 mitigation measures. Physical distancing of 2 meters between individuals must be prioritized to reduce the risk of COVID-19 transmission on school buses and in classrooms. Hence, bus occupancy and class sizes must be reduced. We have asked the board to petition the Ministry of Education for necessary funds while simultaneously taking any and all actions at its disposal to reach this critical objective.
1 minute.
Thank you. Given that guardians are stakeholders in the education of children, we have requested that the board ensure that all guardians are receiving clear and detailed information regarding school bus and classroom conditions. I thank you once again for the opportunity to share our concerns with you this evening. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. You had 17 seconds to spare there. You did great. I have a speakers list started. So for our, just as a reminder, for our questions of clarification, we have 10 minutes for questions of clarification. And just as a reminder, these are questions of clarification only, please. Our first speaker on the list is Trustee Foley. Go ahead, Trustee Foley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Doctor, thank you very much. It was a very thorough presentation. I greatly appreciate what you shared with us. I'm just wondering, are there any other specific situations that you've learned of? Any particular concerns that you have as an epidemiologist that you haven't covered when you were talking about concerns in the classroom?
I certainly think that classroom crowding is going to facilitate the spread of COVID-19. I think we, as parents, came home with certain numbers of class sizes at the beginning of the year, and I'm still learning of class sizes that are increasing upwards of 29 and 30 students, which frankly, in non-pandemic times, I think is too high, but it's just absolutely unfathomable in a pandemic situation. I've learned about kindergarten classes where classes aren't being separated into two groups and where spacing is so problematic that children have been eating their snacks and meals on trays on the floor. I've heard situations where functional windows are not being used often and are only opened at the request of young students. And it should not be the responsibility of students to advocate so directly for their own safety. I've heard parents reporting confusion about the policies and processes for excluding symptomatic children from school and when they are allowed to return. Again, with buses, I can't verify personally, but I have heard situations where students from various different schools are on the same bus. This is not the cohort that we are being told about through government channels. And that disinfecting in between those bus loads is also not likely in line with what we're being told.
Thank you. And through you once again, Madam Chair. Doctor, I have one more question for you. Other than masking and the fact that our average is 34 children per bus, is there anything else that you could suggest that would provide some sort of protection on buses for children right now?
Yes, I think, frankly, the provincial government had 6 months to move on some of these more creative options, and I realize that Upper Grand is doing the best that it can with what it might have been provided, but I still think there is opportunity here for the Upper Grand District School Board to be a role model here. Guelph was a role model in mandating masks from the beginning. I think we could be looking at creative use of alternative spaces like community centers or museums, as has been done in other jurisdictions in the world to permit distancing. I've heard of schools, a friend in Toronto has plexiglass barriers where distancing is a concern and where distancing isn't being achieved. I understand that's being done in other regions of the province and other jurisdictions around the world. I think concrete and standardized support of teachers and administrators to enable as much outdoor learning as possible to take place would be another great idea. Again, providing clear recommendations to ensure that classroom windows are left open as much as possible. And then, of course, there's the issue of quality of ventilation systems in schools, and the work done to enhance ventilation systems would be really important to convey to guardians. I think outdoor spaces that's one area where most schools would have access to outdoor spaces with tents and picnic tables. Could be another great way of providing quality education and allowing for physical distancing that's appropriate.
Once again, Doctor, thank you very much for the information you shared. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you. My comments are finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Foley. Next up, I have Trustee Bailey. And just a reminder, these are questions of clarification only, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And in many ways, Trustee Foley has already asked the question that I was going to, but I'm still going to ask it because I believe it hasn't quite fully been answered. I wish to also thank you for speaking to us tonight on this topic. If you've been in on other meetings, you know that this is a very large concern of mine as well. So in terms of busing, you had mentioned distancing, masks, numbers on the bus, communications with parents. You also touched base on disinfecting. I'm just wondering, has your group spoken at all about signage? Are there any other I appreciated the creative solutions you were bringing up around classrooms, some of which I've heard. Maybe just the same thoughts on busing as the question that you just answered about classrooms. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I think, again, my firsthand interactions with buses is next to nil. I'm sharing what colleagues and friends have shared from their schools, and that, again, you know, they'll see a bus pull up and not all of the students are getting off at their school, which would suggest they're going to another school. And while the ones that I have seen, it seems like they're not sitting directly next to one another. It definitely does not seem like there is optimal distancing there. With respect to signage, I'm not sure specifically what you were asking for there. I mean, I don't think signs are going to matter very much if we've got 34 students on the bus. The bottom line is, following the signs or not, we're not going to be able to get the distancing that public health is recommending.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I really wanted to know.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Trustee Busuttil next, and just looking at the time, this will be our last question. Thank you. Go ahead, Trustee Busuttil.
Thank you for the presentation. Just for clarification, you say we during the presentation. I just want to be clear, is it we, your family, or is it we Ontario Safe that you're speaking on behalf?
I would say it's both. Yeah, my family is certainly concerned, and tonight I'm speaking on behalf of a number of concerned parents who are members with Ontario Safe.
So you're speaking on behalf of Ontario Safe. And the second question related to that is, I couldn't tell from your materials, thank you for sending them in advance. I quickly read them this afternoon, is have you delegated the actual decision makers, whether it's Public Health Ontario, Ministry of Health, the agencies that put together the parameters and so on? I couldn't tell from, it makes reference to advocacy, but I'm not sure exactly where or who or when of that, if you can speak to that. And I just have two further quick questions.
Several members, including those of us who worked on the delegation here tonight, have been in regular contact with public health, as well as advocating at both the provincial and federal level.
So that's Public Health Ontario, or sorry, just which public health?
Local public health, I believe.
Okay, so not Public Health Ontario, that in turn informs the Ministry of Health. Okay, and then my next question was, in your document and in your presentation, you make reference to the lack of advocacy and involvement and so on of parents. How would you say, just trying to understand your awareness of how school boards have been engaged across the province, how school boards have been across the province sending letters advocating provincially with the Ontario Public School Board, and just recently the Upper Grand District School Board sent a letter as well. Are you aware of that, or is it just within the health sector? Are you aware of the education sector?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question?
Sure. In your presentation, in your ask, in your request, you speak to two things: that parents weren't engaged in this process, that school boards need to advocate and need to ask the government for more. And my question is, how aware are you of what already has been done by the education sector through the Ontario Public School Board Association, through other provincial boards, and just recently through the Upper Grand District School Board?
I've been following along fairly closely, and I also have a great relationship, I think, with the school administrators at my kids' school. And my personal belief is that you've been doing everything that you can. Certainly, my school administrators have been doing everything that they can. But I think there is an inequity here where there are some school boards who seem to be in much better and much worse position than others. And I think the communication that has been shared, there's great room for improvement there. So I don't wish to negate the hard work that everybody has been doing, and again, particularly the Upper Grand District School Board. We commend the leadership and the strong position that was taken. However, I do still feel that there is room here to continue to push as we see community cases and transmission rising. We're at the start of something that the infectious disease modelers, it's concerning.
Okay, and the final question, and you made reference to it just now and also in your presentation. So have you had presentations with Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph Public Health and their recommendation and their approval of the Upper Grand District School Board's COVID operational plan? And that's my last question.
Yep, so members of the group that prepared the delegation for tonight have been in contact with Wellington Dufferin Public Health. I do not believe any formal delegation has been done, but they have been in regular contact around physical distancing and use of plexiglass.
Thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Trustee Busuttil. Dr. Rogers, did you want to have some? No.
Questions of clarification?
No, sorry, the questions of clarification, our time is up for that.
Oh, are you looking for a response?
You would like to?
Okay, sure, I would be glad to. In terms of the first ask, I believe that it has been referenced earlier by one of the trustees that the board chair has petitioned the province for the funds necessary to reduce the bus occupancy and the class sizes to a more optimal level. So that was the first ask. And I think that you have done that. And I think the letter is included in the board package. You might consider sharing that with the presenters. In terms of what we are doing or trying to do, I would be glad to do my best and then perhaps turn to one of the superintendents. In terms of class size, I would like the delegation to know that we are hiring 165 long-term occasional teachers to reduce class sizes in our secondary and elementary schools. There is a contract teacher and also an occasional teacher shortage in our board and also provincially, but we're doing our best at the moment to get a teacher in front of every class that we currently have. Just so the delegation would know, we are particularly challenged in finding French teachers. You can't seem to find them for love or money, but we are doing our best there. And I believe we hired 3 just today. So if any of you are parents in John McCrae of the grade 6-7 class, and a number of people have written emails to us, I would want you to know we have hired somebody, thank heavens, today, and that person is resigning from their current job and joining us on October the 9th. So we are taking very active steps and we are continuing to hire teachers and trying to attract them. Madam Chair, just so you know, I read an ad the other day from the Algoma District School Board where they were looking for unqualified teachers. They too have a teacher shortage, and I've asked that director to send me the ad. It would be very odd for our parents and community to see us advertising for teachers and saying it doesn't matter if you're certificated or not, but there are links to which people go just so that the delegation would know to find a grown-up in front of a class of students, but it's quite a problem provincially. That said, we're doing our best there. there is a bit of a space issue in our schools. We're quite heavily utilized. And I know there was reference made to spaces in the community, but there is this teacher shortage. There are also supervision issues in terms of student safety. If we cannot find sufficient teachers and we start to cram students into things such as the museum. Somebody suggested the Sleeman Center to me. There's also cleaning and disinfectant issues. But so even if we had all the money in the world, and I'm not saying we do, we don't, it's difficult to resolve this issue easily on a practical level. As long as every student goes to school every day, which is currently the model in the elementary schools, it's not our model in secondary. We were allowed to split our classes into two cohorts where half of them come in the morning and do online learning in the afternoon, and the other half do online learning in the morning and attend school in the afternoon. That was allowed to our board, even though we're not a large board like some of the GTA boards, but it hasn't been allowed in elementary. That would resolve the issue, but would create another issue for many parents in terms of childcare. But that would be a solution. In terms of the buses, the delegation is quite correct. There are 34 students on average. We do strive to have only one student sitting in a seat, and that is what brings the number to 23, which the delegation did mention. We're letting a student be a second student in the seat if the student is either a sibling, so they live in the same household, or is in the same classroom because they're in the classroom bubble. And that to a person standing on a sidewalk looking up might make it look like more than 23. Well, it would be, but that second student to the greatest extent would be a sibling or a classmate. And that's as far as we can go in terms of limiting the number on our buses without starting to kick students off the bus who qualify for transportation. And if we do that, I think we have a different problem. And the reason for this, and again, it's not a financial matter, is there is a provincial bus driver shortage. Many school boards, and it's been widely reported in the media, so this is not new, they have bus service only on alternate days because they don't have enough buses, but more importantly, they have a bus driver shortage. That is not our situation currently. I think we have about 500 bus routes. Every bus that is supposed to pick up children, even if there's certainly not 8 of them, and even if there would be more than 23, picks them up every day. But there are no more buses or bus drivers available to us at the moment. As the delegation and the trustees may know, many people who drive a school bus are doing it as a retired person, either for interest or for a little bit of extra income, and they have been reticent to pick up bus driving at the time of COVID because seniors are considered more at risk than 20-year-olds. So I would want the folks who are delegating and also their colleagues to know that we are trying our best in both areas in terms of the classroom size reduction and also limiting the number of buses. We are very aware of your concerns. We are not saying they're not an issue because we totally know they are on the buses, and particularly in the elementary schools where there is no quotes cohorting. Every student has to go every day, but we're doing our best and we're trying to hire additionally, and it is not an issue of finances. That said, the minister has allowed us to use 2% of our operating budget, which our operating budget, just so the delegation would know, is around about 400 million. We were allowed to use 8 million out of our bank account, our savings account, which we do have, and we're going to expend that. And I would not be surprised if we are not asking the minister for approval later on in October and November through doing a business case to use more from our bank account, and it's called an unrestricted reserve. This is not secret information. It's in our financial statements. We've saved, for quotes, a rainy day for 25 years, and I'd want you to know that none of the unions ever came after they call it Martha's rainy day account. They've never come after it. So if we have permission, we will go back into our reserves, extract more money, and do our very best to keep our children and our staff safe and our parents as comforted and assured as we can. In terms of the communication variability, if I could turn to Gary Slater, who's one of the school superintendents, and Gary, if you could comment, please.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. I can speak to, I'm thinking of some initial action that we could take regarding that issue you spoke to around communication. My colleagues and I can share the concerns around the variability that you've talked about with principals at an upcoming principal meeting. And we'll do that in an effort to gain some greater consistency with the messaging. And we will do our best to share effective best practices when communicating this kind of information with our families. I'd absolutely acknowledge that there's a difference between schools and even within schools and classes with respect to some of the issues you brought up. And so while schools have tried very hard to optimize the distancing and to establish routines and all of the things that go along with COVID, certainly want to make sure that we're representing that fairly and consistently across our schools. So we'll start with that in the next couple of weeks.
And Madam Chair, if I could turn to Mr. Sunoka, just so that the delegation would know, Mr. Sunoka is in charge of our capital and renewal program, and he has also done some work in the area of ventilation, apart from people not getting windows open. And if there's an operating window, it should be open. That there's no excuse for that, and I'm not going to comment other than we'll take it to heart and make sure that the principals and vice principals talk to their staff so we don't have to have children having to ask to open a window. That's a terrible situation. But Mr. Sunoka, if you could talk just briefly to the trustees and the delegation about some of the things that we have done to date as it relates to ventilation from your perspective, not from the perspective of people who haven't opened the windows.
Through you, Madam Chair, certainly. There was a report in August which summarized the fairly extensive programs in renewal. Our renewal program has actually been focused on making sure that we do look at servicing the ventilation components of our schools extensively. And I think this is now by memory, but I believe in that report, trustees would have seen $4 to $4.5 million spent this year alone on the likes of replacing heating, ventilating, and air conditioning units, exhaust fans, which provide ventilation, internal units, and a number of other things. I don't believe we have any schools where there are not operating windows on external walls. But if there are, I've certainly put out a call to let me know. We have also started looking at reviewing some of the ventilation systems in our schools, starting with, of course, the oldest ones. And we have begun a program of reviewing the way in which they're operating and trying to optimize those. And we have an RFP out for a consulting firm actually to help do some ventilation focused inspections externally, both so they can add to our capacities of internal people and also to take a look from the outside with fresh eyes as to things we might have overlooked. So that would be my brief summary, and if there are further clarifications required, Madam Chair, I'd be certainly pleased to help make them.
Thank you, Mr. Sunoka. So, Madam Chair, that summarizes some of the things. We also just received the speaking notes this afternoon, but I would like to thank the delegation for forwarding their speaking notes to the trustees and the chair for forwarding them to us so we could at least have a few minutes to think. And we will continue to take very seriously the things which are in the delegation's notes, which were very thorough, very comprehensive, and do our level best to be as responsive to parents and to the concerns of Dr. Greer, Dr. Jones-Bitton, and certainly Dr. Chittle, if she's part of your group, who's also written to us. And I just would want Dr. Chittle, if she's listening, to know that we've taken her concerns very seriously as well. And I commit to you, we will do our very best.
Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Rogers, and to the staff. Trustees, if you would like at this point to have a response to the delegation, we can do that. Or we also do have item 15 coming up on the agenda, which is the update on school opening. And so if we want to wait until that item and have more information from the staff, that. Trustee Busatil.
Yes, thank you. Through in future, I would appreciate a response to delegations. That gives us an opportunity, and not the staff, as political leaders, to provide some comments back so that the parents and the delegation are aware of our understanding and the work that we are doing as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Busatil. So are you asking that we do a response from the trustees now, or are you asking that we wait until item 15?
Yeah, it's not on the agenda, and I assumed that it was going to be as part of number 15, but you segued
Okay.
into the agenda. So I can wait until and follow the agenda as printed and approved.
Okay. Thank you, Trustee Busatil. So Dr. Jones-Bitton, thank you very much for presenting to us today.